Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Yes, you yield?
Yes, I will.
First, I want to say thank you for this update, and thank you for your commitment to improving the budget. I think we still have some important steps forward to make, more accurately, we still have a long way to go. I want to just ask you a couple of questions on the education part of the budget. My understanding is that we have not finalized the difference between the Senate and the House yet on Article 3.
That is correct.
And finalizing that really is going to follow the passage of Senate Bill 1811.
That is correct. And we have to pass 1811 before we know exactly how much money we have to spend for education.
If I heard you correctly, we have a gap between the House and the Senate of $1 billion for higher ed.
That is correct.
And $3.8 billion for public ed.
That is right.
So those combined for nearly $5 billion.
That is
How
right.
much does Senate Bill 1811 raise?
It raises about $2.5 billion.
2.5. If you add the comptroller's revised revenue estimate, 3.7.
We're getting closer.
So there's still a gap, and I guess my question is, will the Senate come down even if we pass SB 1811?
We are negotiating with them.
Where will the $1.2 billion in new revenue be allocated to?
Well,
will it all go to Article 3, or will it be spread across the other articles?
Well, Mike, last night the conferees met and adopted all of the articles except Article 3, which is education, and Article 9, which is kind of our cleanup article. Sure. And so we have adopted all of the articles before we received the word from the comptroller.
But were you anticipating, did you finalize those articles in anticipation of a revised revenue estimate?
Yes, we did. We anticipated some money that she was going to revise her revenue estimate.
And so what is that figure that's going to take away from the $1.2 billion and not go to Article 3?
We were estimating that $700 million would be our figure from the comptroller today.
And how much of that is going to go to the non-education articles that allowed you to finalize those articles and send them to the printer?
We were anticipating using most of that for other articles.
For other articles, okay. So about $700 million. What I hear you
kind of throughout the whole budget, we were.
So maybe half of the $1.2 billion in new revenue that the comptroller is estimating is going to be available for Article 3.
3.
Less than half. So that leaves a much wider gap.
We have to pass 1811 in order to close that gap.
And I want to help you do that.
Pardon me?
And I want to help you do that. And I think we need to put on the table, as you know, I've held this opinion for some time, every option to mitigate the cuts to public education, the quality of our children's education. From pre-K through college. But this is not, it appears to me we're not moving the needle. We're not even funding the Senate's budget.
We're not, Mike, there are still cuts. Our revenue in the state of Texas is considerably down. Even with the $1.2 billion that the comptroller gave us today, it's still a huge decrease in the amount of money that we had the last biennium. And we are making cuts throughout our budget.
Are we using any rainy day funds to mitigate the cuts to our children's education over the next 2 years?
We use $3.1 billion of rainy day funds for our current budget in House Bill 275 and also in House Bill 4.
And that allows us to not run out of money in this fiscal year.
That pays our bills for this fiscal year.
That pays our bills for this fiscal year, and it prevents us from the embarrassment of not paying our bills this fiscal year.
That is correct.
Are we using any rainy day funds to finance the next 2 years?
Mike, we are not anticipating the use of any new rainy day fund for the next biennium.
Not a single dime
We are not anticipating that.
of this self-replenishing fund. I just want to make sure I understand.
And let me make clear that not only did the comptroller give us $1.2 billion for available revenue for the next biennium, she also announced that she was estimating that the rainy day fund would grow by $300 million.
By $300 million. And so we'll go from about $600 billion to $6.3 billion.
That is correct.
Is it true that part of financing Article 2 is based on the assumption that the federal government is going to provide us certain waivers to our CHIP program and our Medicaid program that provides health insurance to children?
And I will have to call on Dr. Zerwas if we get too deep on this, but the Commissioner of Health and Human Service has worked with us and said that he could apply for certain waivers that would save us money in our Medicaid expenses or our appropriations we have to do for Health and Human Services.
I understand some of these waivers have already, we have requested once before, namely asking for flexibility on CHIP and Medicaid. Dr. Zerwas, is that accurate?
Yeah, these really aren't new waivers. The ideas aren't necessarily new. It's just a different time, and it's a time where we think that, as we all know, the federal government is looking at ways to try to let the states, create some efficiencies, which obviously should translate into efficiencies at the federal level.
Is it accurate that this particular waiver we have requested of the federal government during the Bush administration and been denied?
I think a couple of things you're talking about. I think that one you're talking about is a block grant waiver. And yes, we were denied that. Rhode Island was given a block grant and has seen a substantial reduction in the cost of their Medicaid program without compromising services. Small pilot project, if you will, about the size of Houston. So, but it does give you a sense that you can make that work. The Medicaid waiver that perhaps you're referring to is a $700 million waiver.
That's right.
That has multiple facets to it that is intended to enhance the flexibility of the current program that we have in terms of being able to deliver the care.
And we've asked the federal government for that waiver once before.
We've probably asked for parts of that waiver before, whether we've asked for it as a portfolio of opportunities in order to try to enhance the efficiency of our program. I don't know that we've actually ever done that. And I would also say that there's other states that are asking for this exact portfolio of waivers.
I also understand we are asking for a waiver that would have the federal government assume financial responsibility for 100% of the health care services provided to unauthorized immigrants.
That's part of that portfolio of
And-
initiatives within that flexibility waiver.
And the LBB is estimating that the federal government will grant us this waiver and giving us credit to balance our budget.
Well, it's a comment I made the other day. If you don't ask, you're surely not going to get it. And
Certainly, but it appears that the LBB is assuming that we are going to get that waiver and giving us credit at this time to balance our budget.
No, it depends on how you look at it. And Chairman Turner and I had this conversation last night as we talked about how does the LBB apportion these savings. They do not use the savings assumed, or at least the full amount of the savings assumed in this bill, in order to determine how far we can fund Medicaid in this biennium. So when we say how much money do we have to keep the Medicaid program flowing in terms of dollars, these dollars are not included. These savings are not included in that projection. They are included in the things that we do within the budget to help provide some provider rate reductions and so forth.
I have one final question for Chairman Pitts, and I'll let the gentleman behind me take over. Based on some of the figures that you've offered, it appears if you add let's see, the Senate Bill 1811 raises, give me that dollar figure again. How much does Senate Bill 1811 raise?
Well, I want to be clear that the way we have some amendments to that bill that will also add some money, but I think at the end of the day that we'll get somewhere between around 2.5 billion.
2.5. And if you add the unobligated new revenue from the comptroller, that's that's 700,000 unobligated about.
It's 500.
So 3.2.